is part 2 of the history of animation. Cartoons in our culture, from Snow White to streaming. This is the 10-minute version, but if it runs a little bit over 10 minutes, don't applaud. Now, I think it says don't clap me off the stage, but I just have don't clap.
Me off the
So,
stage.
if you don't get any applause, it's because you went over 10 minutes, you'll know.
10, 11, 12.
This speech is a history of cartoons made and shown in the U.S. from the release of Disney's Snow White in 1937 to the present time. It intertwines the animation business, U.S. law, world events, and the rapid rise of technology after World War II to the present. The speech also contains personal anecdotes and comments. This is presented in the context of Speaking to Inform from the Toastmasters Advanced Communication Series. So it's not a pathway speech, but it's okay because you're giving it before the entire world changes and you have to be on path, so don't worry about it. In the event that if Frank is a 20-year veteran in the animation business in Los Angeles, and I look forward to hearing what he has to share with us. No, they're your fine words, I just read them.
A couple of hours ago, my computer's crashed. So there won't be any cartoons. What we're going to do is pretend that we have all just had dinner together. And it's coffee time, drinking coffee, desserts being passed around. And somebody says to me, "So Frank, what do you do?" "I work in animation." "Oh," you say, "I like cartoons." I say, "I can tell you some stuff about it." And so we start talking, and the whole large table of people listens in. In 1934, Walt Disney started production on Snow White. His stalwart business partner, his brother Roy, said, "Walt, don't do it." His darling wife Lillian said, "Honey, no one's going to pay to see a feature-length cartoon." At the world premiere in Hollywood in 1937, in December, the film got a standing ovation, earned $8 million in its first distribution run, and Disney got a Special Academy Award. At the same time, the business is just bouncing along, going on its merry way, as Warner Brothers is making its Merry Melodies and Looney Tunes. Warner Brothers had a different way of making cartoons than a lot of the other studios, especially Disney. The directors and the animators were allowed to come up with whatever they wanted. So hence, we got a lot of great characters like Elmer Fudd. "Very, very quiet. I'm chasing rabbits." And his protagonist, "What's up, Doc?" The "What's up, Doc" comes from a director revered to this day in animation circles, Tex Avery, one of a group of 10 to 12 people that all animators talk about, who describe animation as that style of their name. And he says, "What's up, Doc" was simply a way of saying hi to his boyhood friends in his Midwest town. When it first showed up in a cartoon show called A Wild Hare, audiences just loved it. Warner Brothers characters are being used to this very day. Somewhere at some animation desk not far from here, someone is drawing a Warner Brothers cartoons. And they're some of the most recognizable characters on the planet. Max and Dave Fleischer. If you were lucky enough to see me last month, I talked about Max and Dave Fleischer. And they've been chugging along, still very creative, prolific, and innovative. When their distributor, Paramount Pictures, saw how much money Disney was making on Snow White, Paramount finally loosens its purse strings to the Fleischer Boys, and they made their first animated feature called Gulliver's Travels, which also did very well. They finished this off in their studio in Florida. Very shortly after the completion of that picture, the Fleischer Brothers created the best cartoon series ever. It's my speech, I can be editorial. It was the Superman series. And it included elements of course, the comics and superheroes and special effects and Art Deco and science fiction and film noir gangster films. If you have the chance to see it, you'll see it right away. You'll see it in the first 30 seconds. You'll see it in the opening credits, for crying out loud. It is just a gorgeous piece of American artwork. It was their swan song. By this point, due to their nature and the nature of the business, they weren't talking to each other, and there were financial shenanigans, and Paramount kicked them out, and that was the end of the Fleischer Brothers. Terry Toons was founded by a guy named Paul Terry. Paul Terry had been around for a very long time, also since 1916, worked for the Bray Studio, which is a very influential studio. It was one of the first commercial animation studios in New York. And there were a lot of people in the history of animation who all came out of that place. Paul Terry says of himself, he says, Disney is the Tiffany's of animation. I'm the Woolworths. He was very hard on himself, I think, because he kept on making films through the 70s. I mean, he crossed the TV barrier, as I like to call it. His favorite thing of mine is Mighty Mouse. Mighty Mouse was a spoof of the Fleischer's Superman. And it was 1941, and it's certainly not made clear, but I actually just saw it very recently, and it looks like this beautiful German, Polish, Eastern European town done in vaguely a Disney kind of way, and very brutal Nazi-like cats come in and do all sorts of terrible things to the mice. So our hero-to-be runs into a building, and the announcer goes, "Behold!" As if you could see the announcer, but he went, "Behold! A supermarket." And so our hero bathes in super soap, dines on super cheese, chews on super celery, and actually now it's, "Behold! Mighty Mouse!" Now, I kind of think you expected me to say Super Mouse, which it originally was, but they took those off the front credits because Super Mouse was being used at the time as a comic strip character. But it was great, great stuff. World War II. It's a boom and a bust for the animation business. A lot of the studios, like the ones I've mentioned and even others I haven't, made a lot of films for the military. Training films, propaganda films, outright anti-Nazi films. Some really good stuff. It reminds me of how when people write editorials, the wording is so filled with emotion. Some really, really good stuff. And Disney was involved in that, but for Disney himself, it was a bit of a bust because his biggest customer was Germany. And so after the war, he was forced to do making more, using more limited animation. The legal system forces itself into our story about animation. In 1948, the big movie studios that own the animation studios and other distributors are forced to stop demanding that the movie theaters buy their cartoons as well as the feature. Right?
No.
That was the thing. You had to just, you want a show Gone with the Wind, then you got to buy Bugs Bunny. You want to see you want to show Scarface, you got to show Daffy Duck. It cut the budget, it cut the quality. More talking, less animation. It was foretelling of things to come because along comes that barrier I just talked about. Here comes TV. Now, I was the 8, 10-year-old kid sitting on my living room floor The TV, I remember the TV being huge. If I'm sitting down, the TV was this big, but yeah. Watching cartoons. They did not, at that time, make cartoons for TV. There's 1 or 2 shows. The cartoons they showed were all the shows that were made in the 20s and the 30s. Think whatever you want, the 20s and the 30s. Think of black and white films and gangster films and how people dressed in the cars. And that it's a different culture. It's the American culture. But it's a different culture. And a lot of the stuff came out of the Fleischer Brothers because they were real prolific. And they were dark and sexual and psycho and scary monsters and surreal landscapes. And Betty Boop was really, really sexy, I think, as an 8-year-old. And I think, thank you, Carl. I think that the early TV programmers for television, for kids, didn't really know what they were showing. I'm sure I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars talking to a therapist about what this all did to me. So, the first cartoon for TV was something called Crusader Rabbit. It was terrible, cheap animation. In fact, it was really bad. You know, out of everything, I'd like to show it to you. It was like a storybook with animation. Really. But there was a certain charm. Interestingly enough, because I love to connect things, Jay Ward, who created and produces, was the nephew of Paul Terry of Mighty Mouse. Mighty Mouse fame. I just love that. Well, Jay Ward, did they get better or just lucky? I mean, this is show business, there's no rules. Rocky and Bullwinkle. Rocky and Bullwinkle is terrible, cheap animation, but it is charming, terrible, cheap animation. I'm sure you all have some sort of idea, either an oral picture or a visual picture of Rocky and Bullwinkle with one-liners such as Rocky saying to Bullwinkle, "Bullwinkle, you know what an A-bomb is?" Some people call our show A-bomb. Okay, and it was like that. And it was like, it was really well written, as if, you know, Rodney Dangerfield was writing the script. And it was the beginning of writer-driven shows. Now we get to Hanna-Barbera. You've all heard of Hanna-Barbera. William Hanna, Joseph Barbera, they worked at MGM making beautiful old-timey cartoons, along with Tex Avery, by the way. I want to pull Tex Avery back there, the very early Tom and Jerry stuff. They defined limited animation. They owned 80% of the children's TV landscape from 1957 to 1969. They created hundreds of shows, most of which we've never heard of. I mean, they obviously were great businessmen. They just got the networks who just borrowed their shows. But of course, you know, the Jetsons, Flintstones, which is why I think most people think there were dinosaurs at the times of humans, because they all watched the Flintstones. They were not. They were not. But Scooby-Doo. A lot of these shows are still alive today. In my career, in the past, 10 to 12 years, I've worked on 2 different Scooby-Doo shows. So they exist. Ralph Bakshi also worked for Terry Toons. And he worked on the original Mighty Mouse. And he produced, directed, the first X-rated animated feature. And he also went on to produce another version of Mighty Mouse. There's a whole other story there. A great quote that comes from him that I think about when I'm working is, "Animation is too good for kids." So as I said, the Jay Ward and the Hanna-Barbera stuff got the shows to be writer-driven, and we get to The Simpsons and Family Guy. The Simpsons are based on writers. I mean, there's somebody, you know, Late Show talk host was a writer for The Simpsons. They're revered. All the shows are not based on what kind of gags would happen, how Homer could slip on a banana peel, although I'm sure that's done. But that was the quality of stuff going on in the 30s and the 40s. This is all writer-driven. What stories can we tell? How clever can we be? Along comes cable. And 2 networks open up just for cartoons. My goodness. I mean, cartoons are important to somebody who's counting the money, and hopefully to most of us for the enjoyment of it. Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network. Now they first open up as a studio but they become their own production company. Nickelodeon Studios opens up, they supply the pipeline. Cartoon Network opens up, and Cartoon Network Studios open up. So what happens is that 1948 court decision, the powers that be, the people that run the money, they basically reversed it. Right? Do you see what I mean? Instead of being movie theaters, they go, heck, we own the cable. We don't have to pay anybody else. We'll make our own stuff and we'll show it through our own cable system. And then comes people who are just laying down the pipelines, so to speak, the optical cables. We jump to the very present, AT&T. You know that AT&T just bought Warner Brothers. For, I don't want to figure out, so it's some uncommon figure. And the only reason is that they own all the optical cables. And they're going, why should we pay people to produce stuff for us to put through our optical cable? We'll own the studio. And that's what's happened now. And now animation was started with some like lonely guy sitting in a dark office lit by a single Edison light bulb working for hours away, is now a $200 billion worldwide business. Mr. Toastmaster, I am done.